On this China Open Draw edition of Prime Sports Tennis, we'll preview the China Open with match analysis, the leading storylines, the latest odds, predictions, and more as PST on PSN starts now. All right, it's a Saturday. That's right, we're back on a Saturday, the 30th of September, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and a special edition of Prime Sports Tennis today. We're going to take a look at the draw. The event just started last night, is continuing for the next several days, of course. And so don't forget, we'll be back with our regular day on Tuesday to update everything that's going on here. We'll also take a look at the end of the show on what's going on the ATP side, as they have themselves an event also going on in China. So we've got the China Opens to talk about. Let's welcome in actually, she has been with us here on the Prime Sports Radio Network covering tennis now for, I think, it's gone so fast, Andrea. I think it's gone like a year and a half that you've been with us. Lead tennis analyst, former top 15 player in the world. Time flies, but I think we're having fun, aren't we?
Well, that's what they all say. Time flies fast with me. But no, it's been great. I'm on China time now, Greg. I've been up all night the whole week, watching the women in Wuhan, and now we have the men and women in Beijing. It's the big premier mandatory for the women, smaller event for the men, but they still have Nadal and a host of other Americans. Isner Sock, Jared Donaldson is in there, of course, Dimitrov, so we'll get to that later. But it's really the women who have been commanding the show, as Joe Conta wants everyone to know this week, took up the cause for the ladies, said we've been producing the best tennis, she said. And indeed, it's been dramatic, as always, starting out this morning with Sharapova's three-set marathon against Sevastova, who she lost to at the U.S. Open, got some revenge, came back from match point down. But it's always dramatic. So we first, though, Greg, want to give a shout-out to Caroline Wozniacki. Just a few hours ago was confirmed, is in the WTA finals in Singapore. The BNP Paribas WTA final is called now. And so we congratulate her, Greg. She has won more matches on tour than any other top player, 53 matches, unbelievable. She has been to more finals than any other player on tour, 7. Won her first title of the year at the Toray Pan Pacific a couple weeks ago, and that was her 26th career title. So Caroline Wozniacki, the absolute consummate professional, always there, always, absolutely raring to go, never can count her out, is now in the running for the top final 8. And, of course, in 2010, she got to the finals of the WTA year-ender. And so, good vibes for her, because she's in Beijing. She's got a tough draw. But she's very resourceful, and we're glad to see her playing a little bit more aggressively now.
Yeah, she does have a tough draw. In her quarter alone, if she wins her first round match, she's going to take on Pavlyuchenkova, who actually is your sleeper pick if there is one in this tournament. That's just to get to the third round and possibly face Kvitova. And then, of course, also in that quarter, you got Muguruza, the top seed, and in a match that we'd like to see in the third round against Coco.
Well, of course, and the Pavlyuchenkova is who Caroline beat in the finals of the Toray Pan Pacific. It was a tough match, but Caroline really played well to hang in there and played more aggressively, 6 aces, only 3 unforced errors, but much more aggressive style is what helped her get to that title, because she had to beat Muguruza as well. And again, it's the same names we see in the same parts of the draw. I think the girls feel like, the draw is always bringing about the same competitors. So she'll have Muguruza, as you said. I think Muguruza will probably get through that. Coco Vandeweghe has not played since the U.S. Open, took a bit of a break, went to see her older brother in San Francisco, spent time hiking up and down the hills of San Francisco. So it was not really in tennis mode, and I'm not sure she's going to be able to really turn it around that fast for Beijing. But the court is relatively fast. Coco's always at her best when there's no pressure on her, when the expectations are low. And certainly she's beaten Muguruza before, beat her at the Australian Open in that wonderful run that she had there. But I'd have to say that Muguruza has been the steadier player. Not the big high that we saw at Wimbledon, not the incredible performance that we saw there or at Cincinnati, but more of a consistent level and a pretty good approach. So I'd have to say Muguruza through there. Caroline, of course, we mentioned she has Pavlyuchenkova, she has Kvitova, who always plays well in Asia. Kvitova just seems to absolutely shine once she gets to China. I don't know what it is about China, maybe the fast courts, maybe the fact that the fans are so adoring of her, and she just is so relaxed there. But I think it'll be a tough run for Caroline, but, of course, she's beaten Muguruza before, just beat her 2 weeks ago, so it's a doable.
All right. So, yeah, that just shows you how competitive just that quarter is. And by the way, I know Coco, we talked about the points race a few days ago, and I think what it is, you get like about 900 points on the women's side if you win the event. So
right. So Caroline Garcia too just won Wuhan today, so she'll get a bunch of points. She moves ahead probably of Milanovic to become the number 1 ranked French woman. So that will be interesting. And of course she beat Ash Barty, who beat 4 players in the top 10 to get to that final, beat Konta, Radwanska, and Pliskova, all the way to the final. And Ostapenko was a very easy run, 3 in love for Barty. So congratulations to her in getting to that final. But yeah, they both are in the draw. They're both floaters in there. They get buys in the first round, though, Greg. When you reach the semifinals of the week before and you have an early start in the next week, they do give buys to accommodate those players because that's the only way they could obviously play and compete, with the schedule.
All right, and then Garcia possibly facing Kerber. And Kerber didn't have the greatest season. It's almost coming to an end. Any reason to think that Kerber might have something left in the tank here?
Well, Kerber is one of the 3. We talked about Kerber, Sibakova, and Radwanska, looking for them to drop out of the top 15. They've had a very subpar seasons. But Kerber's rallied a little bit. She beat Osaka today in the first round. She's beaten her now 2 out of 3 times. She lost her, as we remember, at the U.S. Open. Tough loss there. But Kerber's rebounded a little bit. She's showing a little bit more fight. Obviously, we don't know how Caroline Garcia is going to feel after having to go through such a run in Wuhan. Does she have the physical? Does she have the fitness to really endure and turn it around so quickly in Beijing? It is a different speed on the court. Of course, Wuhan was very, very fast, lightning fast. And in Beijing, it looks slower to me, a lot slower. So Caroline's going to have to get a lot more balls in the court. And, of course, she has Sibylkova in that part of her draw first. She did beat Sibylkova last week. But it's going to be a task for Caroline to really be able to have the patience. And as we said, we're going to see her if her legs are tested to see if she has that physical endurance after such a tough week in Wuhan.
All right. So as far as this particular half of the draw, though, is Muguruza still your favorite to come out of here, even though she's in a very tough quarter?
It's so interesting because when Joe Konta was asked about the women this year and how, it's just so all over the board, you never know who's going to win. And we've had so many title winners this year, and the Grand Slams have been all over the place. Ostapenko, Muguruza, and of course Serena did win the first one, and Sloane Stephens out of nowhere for the U.S. Open. And Konta said, you know what, we just have so much depth. And on any given day, these girls can play well. The girls ranked from 20 to 30 are just playing so tough. And so the girls in the top 10, it's really been about consistency, about experience, and about attitude. And so far, to me, Muguruza looks tough, but, she's one of these players where she lost to Barty last week and didn't really wasn't able to turn it around. She lost to Ostapenko last week after winning the first set and wasn't able to turn it around and really didn't have any excuses as to why. Just was a bit flat, not really going for her shots. And so, yes, should on paper Muguruza get through? Absolutely. She's the number 1 player in the world. And, of course, she wants to contain that title. She doesn't want to give it away. There's a rankings race right now with Pliskova and Halep right behind her, and Svitolina not far from that. But I think, Greg, it will not surprise me if we see more upsets as we saw in Wuhan.
Yeah, and how about Kvitova? Because shouldn't she see in every sport when you get players, and of course you played. If say you're injured, you haven't played in a while. Everybody else is worn down. They've played. They're coming to the end of the season. Here's Kvitova. She's worked her way back. She's trying to get into a groove as opposed to ending her season and running out of gas. So shouldn't she be a possible player to keep an eye on here?
Well, we've seen Kvitova in so many different stages. Of course, she's making that miraculous comeback from that horrible attack this year. Did that, came back, has played well. But she obviously paces herself to peak in Asia, in my opinion. She loves the surface there. She loves everything about the environment, and that's where she's at her best. Sometimes they had a roof over Wuhan. They have, you can have that indoor type of feeling there. These coliseums are huge. So she obviously likes it. I have to say that Kvitova is always her most dangerous in Asia because, as you mentioned, a lot of these women have played far more matches than she has. We talked about Caroline Wozniacki, 53 and 18 on the year match record. Most of the top 10 have over 40 wins, far more than Kvitova. So they've played a lot more than she has. And so, yeah, she has a little bit more in the tank, and to that degree, she's got the big weapons that suit these courts so well. So you have to consider her dangerous. But it's, look, after the Open, this is the last swing for the tour until the end, and it's in Asia. It's a long way to go. There's jet lag. There's all kinds of things they have to get over. They have to get accustomed to the court surfaces. They're very, very different week in, week out, as are the accommodations. It was funny. I think it was Barty who said she asked room service to bring her some ice to ice her leg or something, and they brought her rice.
Right.
So, there's a little bit of a communication thing where you have to be patient off court as well and get used to everything. It is very different in China than in Tokyo and Japan. So, I think that Kvitova just seems to gel with it. But girls like Konta seem to be having more trouble. Again, Konta losing in the first round to Barty last week. She's lost 5 of the last 7 matches she's played. She did win a couple matches in Cincinnati, but lost in the first round of Toronto, the U.S. Open, and now, of course, Wuhan. So very streaky from Konta, not the consistency we're used to seeing from her, which I think makes her very vulnerable because she's not someone who's very good at being able to wing it or being able to, think on her feet. She likes everything very, very constant. And so in Asia, it's probably a little bit out of her comfort zone. But, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and she's, of course, she might end up playing Ostapenko in the third round. And Konta's still trying to hang on, too, for that. For one of those final berths into the finals. So these matches become very important for her. And not sure if anybody's going to be able to pass her, but, if she can win a few matches here, maybe even make it to the semis, maybe that could clinch a spot for her. But Ostapenko, Konta, possibly in the third round. Then you take a look just a little bit underneath there, and you've got probably the most intriguing first-round match between junior rivals Sloane Stephens, now a U.S. Open champ. We could say former maybe next year, and Christina McHale.
Rivals in the juniors. I remember watching those two girls many times. Christina had to qualify, beat Nicole Gibbs in a tough 3-setter, had a tough 3-setter before that. McHale always seems to go 3 sets. Doesn't able to sustain a lead as well as she plays from behind. Obviously, this will be a totally psychological match between her and Sloane. Sloane, with the U.S. Open behind her, should have the confidence and the game, obviously, and the speed. It's the foot speed that so bothers McHale. She moves so much better than Christina. That makes Christina play that extra ball and makes her come up with the unforced error. So it's a question, though, with Sloane and Madison. We mentioned that Madison Keys, only 2 of the top 20 are not there. Madison pulled out late, and Venus Williams pulled out a couple weeks ago. Of course, Venus is going to play Hong Kong and then the championships. And that's you're over in Asia a month for that, Greg. And for a 37-year-old who has more Grand Slam wins than anyone this year and has to be pretty tired after all that, that's okay. She needs a break. She doesn't need to go play Beijing and add another 3 weeks to the schedule over there. So we understand that. And, look, we're just happy when Venus shows up. But Madison played Wuhan, lost in the first round, came up with the wrist issues again. But for both Madison and Sloane, it's so important that they get to these events well ahead of time because you can't fly in on Thursday, get in late Friday, try and get everything accustomed to in one day, and then play a match the next day. And these are two ladies who really need to get into a routine, need to take their time, do all their stretching, do all their stuff that they need to so that they don't have these quirky injuries. And, of course, with Madison having 2 procedures on this wrist, the prep work is so important for her. And so I think that this is a learning experience. And if you're going to go to Asia, usually Sloane just takes the fall off. Usually after the Open, we don't see Sloane. But because she abbreviated her schedule this year because of the foot surgery in the beginning beginning of the year. She, obviously wants to play as much as she can. But I think that these ladies are going to realize that they have to make the extra time and get there a bit earlier because they also don't wing it very well. And I think that Sloane should be pretty good coming into Beijing because now she's had a week over there, and she should be pretty good, pretty sound. So I'm looking for her to do something.
All right. Well, if she can do something and win a couple of matches, she might be taking on Pliskova in the third round. So that could be nice.
And Pliskova's there with her father. We mentioned that she part with her coach. She fired her coach a couple weeks ago. She's there with Dad this week, says that Dad's on the same page, supportive, did not like the philosophy behind her previous coach. Feels like that she needs to work the point a bit more, not go for the winner on the first shot, that she's not that slow, and that she can stay in the point a bit longer and wait for the right one. So she's going to be tested. I think she is probably the top players that's going to be tested the most in the next couple of weeks because she's relied so much on that serve so much of her career, and she's not getting those free points off it. They're starting to pick up on this serve. They're starting to, she's starting to become a little bit predictable on the serve. So it'll be interesting to see if having her dad there gives her a sense of relief and comfort zone that helps her play with a little bit looser spirit on the court because she's played pretty tight.
All right. And then if you take a look at the final quarter of the draw, and this is where some of the drama happened. I know you were looking forward to a really nice sleep this morning, and then you awakened to some fans that were pretty nervous about the fact that they couldn't find a way to watch the Sharapova match. There were some WTA streaming issues.
Look, the streaming from the WTA has been, I think, terrific. They launched it in the end of July. There has not been any issues. It's been fantastic. I've loved the commentating. I was listening to, I think it was Jill Krabus and Kevin Skinner the other day, and lots of other commentators, all doing a fantastic job. And you get to China, and obviously, look, the signals are tough. It's a long way. There are a lot of communication things. And, of course, so it always has to fall on a Sharapova match.
Yep.
And so you can imagine people getting up early on their Saturday to, just to tune in for this so they can get some coverage of women's tennis. And there was a bit of a glitch. They did resolve it, though, in time to see the second and third set, which I did at that point. I was up. And it was quite the extravaganza. And look, in the end, Maria showed the bravery she needed to by pushing forward. I think Sven Gronvald, her coach, was definitely motioning to her, move forward. Do not sit on that baseline. Do not let yourself get jerked around by Sevastova, who's got the dinks and the angles and all the diversity in her game that really gives Maria such trouble. And look, I think Maria is the first who said it actually herself. She, quote unquote, did not play smart. She was up a set in 4-2 and then up 5-2 in the third, had match points. And I've never seen Maria fold like that for 3 games. And literally, Sevastova had a medical timeout after the second set. She pulled her calf. To me, it looked like an Achilles, which is a tough injury. And she really was not moving in the third at all. And it was really Maria's unforced errors that led her back into the match. And at 5-all, Sevastova went up, played a decent game, up 6-5. And then it was really Maria who had to dig in. And, we mentioned so many things she could do to help improve. We talked about the leg strength. And sure enough, on Instagram, there's the tape of her, improving the leg strength exercises, lifting that weight, getting that physical strength in that leg so she can get lower for the ball. We talked about how she needs a little bit more spin on the forehand. Sure enough, down match point, what does she do? She gets down for the ball low, puts a little spin on that forehand and hit the winner to save the match. And, it was that type of thinking and that type of self-correcting that I think ultimately was what prevailed for Maria, because it was a tough match to watch.
And if she survives her next match, she could be taking on Halep in the third round, and Halep has a new coach.
Well, yeah, I mean, we should say, thank goodness Maria now will be ranked in the top 100. She will be getting into Grand Slams. We're not going to have to worry about those wild cards. If she can win another couple of matches, perhaps then she will be able to get into WTA events. But she's still far off the mark of top 50. And that's really where you need to be to get into the WTA events with no issue. Shelby Rogers was the last one to get into Beijing. I think she's 57 in the world. But she will probably, we say she's going to play Halep. Halep did beat Risk in 3 sets in the first round. Halep, though, it's such an interesting experience to listen to Halep. She's a counterpuncher, Greg. She's a runner. She hits this top spin. She's a clay quarter. To me, the model for her is Andrea Jaeger, where she's got to learn defense, offense, defense, offense. She's got to add some diversity into her game. She's a small woman. She's not a big woman. She's not even the build of a Sibylkova, who gets all that power from her torso. That's not the way Halep is built. She's built like her dad, who was, a football player who, had the foot speed, which she inherited. But this is a girl, Greg, who has had about 8 chances to become number 1 this year. And we mentioned, of course, winning if she had won at the French Open and then, of course, against Conta at Wimbledon. But there have been easier times. If she played one match, even in the qualifying at New Haven after Cincinnati, she would have become number 1. Had she played anything between Wimbledon and Toronto, she would have become number 1. And so she decided not to go out there and grab it, that she didn't care if it came to her fine, but she was not going to go get it. And I don't think there's another player in the top 10 that would have that type of mentality. I think any of them, if you said, if you do this, you'll become number 1, they were going to run with it. And so when you have someone who is really that type of thinking, where she's not really aggressive by nature, she's not someone to initiate and go get it, it's hard to make her play like that on court. And so this, the instincts are against the game plan, and that is Halep thinks she's going to become, a basher. She's trying to become more powerful. She's trying to be able to hit with these girls. She's trying to become more physically powerful. And you could see the well-developed torso now with all the weightlifting and all the physical stuff. I don't know, though, if this is the right direction. I don't see her as a mini Andre. I don't see her as even a Sibylkova. And she lost in the first round in Wuhan. We'll have to see how she does here. She does not have the diversity Sevastova does. She does not open up the court. We've talked about how the fact she needs to go for those 4 corners. 4 corners, 2 corners in the back of the court, the baseline, the 2 corners at the service line, opening up the court, moving her opponent. The service, because she's got to have a slice serve. You can't just top spin it in. But that does not seem to be her thinking. So she has Andrei Pavel with her, Romanian, former superstar Romanian player. She's very comfortable with that. Darren Cahill is still on board, but just taking a break because he's got family too, and he can't travel every week. But we'll have to see how this all kind of unravels. I think if she faces Sharapova, I just cannot imagine Maria not winning that.
All right. So before we move on and talk about the men, there are 2 women that are not here that are new moms and that would normally be here, Serena and Vika. So where are they, and what are they up to?
They're calling them on the internet because I've never seen 2 women look so phenomenal. I mean, Serena, was it 3 weeks after she's given birth? I've never seen her look so svelte, so in shape, in form as she does. I mean, she was tweeting pictures of herself in these short blue jean shorts and even some sort of leotard type of thing. I've never seen her look so incredible. And Vika too. I mean, another mom, and they both look very fit, model-esque, pretty. And so it's going to be really fun. I think Vika will be playing in the next month, either in Luxembourg or Linz. So we will see her. She will be getting some matches in apparently before the year is over. Serena, I definitely think, unless something unforeseeable happens, we will definitely see her back at the Australian because she just looks phenomenal. And, it's interesting because we've heard so much about the trials and tribulations from all these women. I wish we could put that aside now and have the fashion corner. And I would love to know how Serena and Vika got back into such great shape. And I would love to know from Maria a makeup tutorial and how she makes herself look so fresh and terrific in the post-match press conferences. Because at this point, I think the fan, and we're all fans, would like the self-help tips more than the trials and tribulations at this stage. Because that's what fans want, Greg. They want these types of secrets and so forth at this stage. And I think it's nice to see these ladies in different capacities in the fashion and looking so well and presenting themselves so well. And I hope that they take advantage of that.
Okay. Any timetable on when we'll see them?
Well, we should see Vika, as I said, in the next month. And, of course, Serena, we'll see her for the Australian next year. So yeah, no, I think that it all looks good. Everything's a go for there. But yeah, I think that it'll be very interesting to see how they come back in this new form. Of course, with their children, Leo for Vika, and of course Alexis Olympia for Serena. But the other thing is we've talked so much about, of course, Billie Jean King's movie just came out. Billie Jean and Bobby, about their wonderful match and all that Billie Jean has done in paving the way and equal rights for women, and of course creating this tour for everyone to earn such great livings. And obviously the social issues are just enormous in what Billie Jean has done, and there's just of course no underestimating that. But what she also has done in a little bit of a secular way on this tour is create a business for these players. And what's interesting to me, Greg, is to see how these ladies now are trying to expand on that. And when you see the Serena and all her lines of clothing and her name on so many different things, and the branding that's been done for Serena, and now of course the branding that will probably be done for Alexis Olympia, her little daughter, and of course Maria's Sharapova, they all are trying to create their own history. They're all trying to leave their own mark. And so now I think it's, yes, they understand the history, they understand that with privilege comes responsibility, but now they're also trying to leave their own niche as far as what they're going to contribute to the game, and really in trying to embrace this as a business. And to me, that's the off-court stuff that's so exciting and that we do follow, to see Caroline trying to do so. And I think a lot of these younger girls like Ostapenko and Sloane and Madison all want the same thing now. They, all these branding has really changed the total complexion of how these players approach their careers. And they're much more business-like, much more fundamental in what the bottom line is going to be. And to me, that can only help grow the sport, that they're that interested.
All right. The men, meanwhile, are also in China. They're in Beijing, and Rafa is the number 1 seed. And Sasha is, you got Sasha and Misha both there. But we might see John Isner and Nadal in the 3rd round, and that could be very interesting considering Isner just beat Nadal in London.
Well, Laver Cup,
not in London, in the Laver Cup.
Cup, that was in Prague. We saw John win that huge match against Rafa, straight sets, first time he'd ever done that. And of course, that was with the whole team behind him. That's with Nick Kyrgios running onto court, patting him on the back, saying, "Come on." And now what's interesting is that team is basically now in Beijing. You have Kyrgios, Isner, Sock, Sasha Zverev, Nadal. They're all there now, competing obviously for themselves. But it'll be worthwhile to see how they translate this team experience into now a tournament and how they rebound. I thought that Laver Cup was phenomenal. It rejuvenated these guys, and I expect to see great performances from all of them, including Kyrgios, who has a tough draw. Yes, the men will take a little bit of a backseat if Rafa could ever do something like that. Because I think Rafa Nadal is, obviously the number 1 player in the world, trying to retain that number 1 ranking, as Roger Federer will come back in Shanghai, and then apparently he's going to play Basel and London. Is not sure now about Bercy. May pull out of that. But it'll be interesting to see how these men do leading up, of course, to Shanghai this week.
All right, and then we will talk more about it next week. But you will hopefully see some intriguing matches. Burditch is taking on Donaldson, and then may have to take on Sock in the 2nd round. So there's that.
I think we're going to see a Sasha Zverev quarter. I mean, I'm going to, of course, as we all know, Jack Sock's one of my favorite players. So he's one of my favorite guys. So I'm always optimistic, even though he has not had a great season. I think that the Laver Cup has rejuvenated him. I think it gave him a real mojo back. I think being with John McEnroe has given his mojo back. I mean, John McEnroe deserves a lot of credit. First, it was Caroline Wozniacki and getting her out of the dumps after the U.S. Open. A tough loss there, and he went on the practice court with her at his academy and got her mojo back. Then, of course, it was Sock and Kyrgios, the Laver Cup. So I'm hoping that Sock will, find his form and have that exuberance, that dynamic that he usually does. Because that would be a fun match to watch him play Sasha Zverev.
All right, so we got a long way before, got a whole week, and actually probably 8 days before both of those draws
Well,
are
they're all
finished.
chasing points too, and as you mentioned, Ostapenko, Konta really trying to solidify their spots, their last two spots. The only two I think that could really challenge them are Konetsova, as she did last year, bump Konta out the last minute. She can just keep playing forever and ever. She's the opposite of Selena Massi. You can keep throwing her against the wall, and she pops back up just as strong because she's so resilient and she's so experienced. But other than Konetsova, I personally don't think anyone else has a shot. Sloane, if she won Beijing and won Hong Kong, might have an outside shot. But those are big ifs, and that's a big expectation. So, and I think the men too. And you have all these guys in 11 to 20, whether it's Kyrgios, Sock, Isner, all vying for. Isner has a lot of points coming off. So does Sock. So it'll be interesting to see if these guys in the top 8 can really keep their spots, and what happens actually with Sam Querrey, who's not there this week.
All right, so that'll wrap it up. Again, next week we'll be back to update what's going on both the men and women's side in China, and we'll update, of course, the standings as both the men and women make it to the finals, and that'll be coming up in just several weeks. So we'll be on top of all of that. Andrea, appreciate you taking out your Saturday for joining us here today, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Terrific. I look forward to it.
All right, so that's Andrea Leanne. I'm Greg DePalma, and thanks for tuning in to Prime Sports Tennis. Don't forget to check out our end of the season 2017 Aces Award Show, and to check out all our PSN On-Demand shows following every live broadcast on PrimeSportsNetwork.com or on our iTunes, YouTube pages under Prime Sports Network. For Andrea Leanne, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to Prime Sports Tennis. We'll see you next time.